Yoga Sutras. So we will start with the second portion of the second chapter of the Yoga Sutras, which is on Aṣṭāṅga Yoga. Previously, we studied the first portion of the second chapter, which is the foundation. Patanjali is building up the reason for Aṣṭāṅga Yoga. And Aṣṭāṅga Yoga is the middle path. Mridu-madhyadi matratvat tatopi visheshaha. Mridu, madhya, adhimatra. So mridu is the mild practice. Madhya is the medium intensity practice. Adhimatra is a very intense practice. Adhimatra is what we saw in chapter 1, the Raja Yoga, path of royal practice, royal path. Okay, now, so last class we stopped at the sutra. Patanjali says, Yoganga nushtad ashuddhikshaye jnanaditihi avivekakyate. So why is, okay, my camera has been off. Okay, now you see me. So by the sustained practice of the limbs of yoga, the impurities are destroyed. So it's an important thing. The lamp of wisdom is lit, which leads to discriminative direct knowledge. And in the mythology, itihasas, the example that is used to illustrate this is the Samudra Mathanam, which is the churning of the Shira Sagaram, the ocean of milk. So the entire yoga practice by itself doesn't create wisdom. Yoga practice primarily removes impurity. So this is called Viyoga Karanam. Viyoga means separation. Karana is cause. Viyoga Karana means cause by separation. Vyasa illustrates this quite extensively. Yoga practice removes impurity, and then wisdom naturally arises because of the purity of the mind. This is the sattva guna. So the mind by nature it is sattvic, but because of all this baggage, karma, imprints, kleshas, it becomes, it deviates from sattva to rajas and tamas. And yoga restores this. So this is Yoga Karanam. So the example that is given is the Samudra Mathanam. So the limbs of yoga, Yama and niyama, they destroy the external impurities, gross sins and bad habits. Asana and prāṇāyāma, they destroy the asana and prāṇāyāma, they destroy the internal impurities, distraction, lethargy, everything. Okay, let me just make sure everybody is in. Okay. So let's see the Samudra Mathanam. This is, of course, one of the most famous stories. And we have one person to thank for all these stories, and that is Rishi Durvasa. So Durvasa, if we have one person primarily we have to thank for these stories, it is Rishi Durvasa. Why? Do you know? Can anybody say why? Why Rishi Durvasa is responsible for a lot of stories? So the name Durvasa, he's a rishi, he's a sage. Anybody wants to take a guess? Sumitra?
Maybe he gets angry and curses all the time.
That's the reason. Durvasati means one who is very difficult to live with. So Durvasa incidentally is considered a amsha of Shiva's destructive energy, and he is very easy. And he, the more angry he gets, more power he gets, and he gives curses. And we'll see it's Vak Siddhi, when people who have done a lot of tapas and they are they practice satya, which is truthfulness. Their speech will take effect. And because of this, he cursed things will come true. And in this case, what happens is that he curses Indra. Indra loses his power, and all the people, the devas in his kingdom, they become weak. They feel devoid of their tejas. So Bhagavan Vishnu tells him to churn the ocean of milk, Ksheera-sāgaram, to obtain nectar, so that they are restored of their divine nature, their radiance. Now, all these stories are profoundly symbolic. None of these stories are just stories told for some loose moral concept, or no, it's not to it's not a very what can I say, it's not a cliche. They have profound symbolisms behind. So we'll see some of this. You might have heard the story, but probably you don't know about the depth of the symbolisms. So the most famous allegory for this removing the impurities is the Samudra Mathanam, as I told you. In here, the practice of yoga is the churning. You're doing this action. The removal and the impurity is the poison. We'll see the poison that will come out. And then the emergence of wisdom is akin to this nectar. Okay, this is the Samudra Mathanam, churning of the ocean of milk. Ksheera-sāgaram. Ksheera means milk. Sagar is ocean, the ocean of milk. So the story is the devas. Devas represents, I said they're not like gods, they represent in us also the forces of light, sattva guna. And asuras represent the tamo, primarily tamo, and some rajoguna. The asuras are the, like, call it demonic nature in us. So the devas and the asuras agree to churn the milky ocean. So the devas and asuras are basically symbolisms of our divine and demonic natures. We all have both of them. So they agree to churn the milky ocean to obtain amrita. Why did they also agree? Because the devas, they were by themselves not strong. So Bhagavan Vishnu says, ask the help of the asuras also to churn. So the devas went and told asuras, hey, we'll give you a share of the nectar that will come out. Please help us churn. So they agreed, and they started churning. So, and the amrita represents the nectar of immortality. What is nectar of immortality? What is that a symbolism for? Anybody wants to say?
Moksha?
Yes, it is knowledge leading to moksha, liberation. And they use the Mount Mandara, the great mountain Mandara, to churn. And what does Mandara represent, you think? So in this picture, you see them churning with what does a mountain stand for? Achalam. Mountain is called Achalam, which means unmovable. So what do you think it symbolizes?
Dharma?
No, it symbolizes concentration of the mind.
Okay, dharma.
Unmoving mind. So achalo, always a mountain is used like the mind steady state. And the rod, and people typically use a churning rod. Here they use Vasuki, the serpent. It represents the deep desire for liberation, the energy, as the rope, the churning rope. The churning itself represents the yoga anga anushtana. So the yoga anga anushtanam, it's a sustained practice. Anu means to follow. So essentially what it means is keep following doing the practice, sustained practice. So yoga anga anushtana is the sustained practice. The first, what comes? Does the nectar come right away? No. So you see, the first thing that comes is poison. And that's from the Vasuki, which is huffing and puffing. Vasuki and Adisesha, they're both brothers. Vasuki is shown as a poisonous serpent. Adisesha is shown as this big, luxurious pillow. So Vasuki is what Shiva wears around the neck. It's like a poisonous serpent, whereas Adisesha is typically represented as like a python like with 1,000 heads, like a bed, nice, soft, squishy bed for Bhagavan Vishnu. And they begins churning intensely. Vasuki was huffing and puffing, and it's spitting poison. And we saw this story before. Aparamrishtaha, Shiva comes and takes the poison. Because Shiva is aparamrishtaha, means unaffected by any of the worldly struggles. So in the example of Ishvara, if you remember, Klesha Kala, aparamrishtaha Purusha Vishesha Ishvaraha. So Shiva is representative of the supreme Ishvara, who can take anything and not be affected. So he comes and swallows the poison. This poison represents the impurities buried deep in our subconscious. When you start yoga or meditation, often poison comes up first. Old traumas, anger, restlessness. So even for people who now meditations use mindfulness, they call it, used as a therapy. And there it is very common for first a lot of anger, a lot of these negative feelings will come out. And that's the process of cleansing. Because you were so desensitized, you're hiding everything. When you start going in, the first thing that you see is all the hidden stuff, and they start coming out. Lord Shiva had to consume the poison to save them, representing the need for detachment. Ishvara Pranidhana. Then come the gems. So nectar doesn't come first. Then comes the gems. That's the second picture that you see. So what all come? You see, flying horse, Uchaishrava. Then you see a cow, that is Kamadenu. Kama is desire, Denu means giver, giver of desire. So this Kamadenu was given to Vasishta. Remember that story? Vishwamitra tries to take the cow by force from Vasishta, and he is not successful. So then comes a magical elephant, Airavatar, which is given to Indra as his vehicle. Then comes the perfect woman, and that is the goddess of wealth, Lakshmi. And the perfect woman needs the perfect man, Purusha Uttama, and she becomes the wife of Bhagavan Vishnu. So these represents Jnana Deeptihi, the flashes of brilliance, powers, insights that come to a yogi. These are all the siddhis. The Devas were tempted to stop and enjoy this, but Bhagavan tells, keep going, keep churning. So the important message here is that you have to go past the siddhis. Okay. All right. Okay.
Anna, what does the snake represent again?
Snake represents that's the one that you use to churn. It represents the energy, the desire to get the knowledge. So you need to have like a tīvra mumukshitvam, they call it, which is a deep desire to be free. That is that snake. Okay, so it's all symbolisms. Finally, so we'll see in the third chapter also, Patanjali talks about siddhis. We'll see a lot of siddhis. That will be a fun chapter. And he finally says, Te samadau upasarga vyuttane siddhayaha. These are obstacles to samadhi. Samadau upasarga vyuttane siddhayaha. In this material world, they are considered great superpowers, but they are obstacles to samadhi. So Bhagavan tells, don't stop with all these gifts, go past. So these are the siddhis. And then finally comes the nectar. Dhanvantri, the great divine physician, you see, is considered avatara of Bhagavan Vishnu. He comes, is dark in color, just like Bhagavan Vishnu, and he holds the pot of Amrita. And then a lot of story comes. But this is the Viveka Khyati, unwavering discernment. Drinking this makes one mortal, because with Viveka Khyati, you can achieve liberation or Kaivalya. So the lesson is, just as the ocean had to be churned to release the nectar, the mind must be churned by the 8 limbs of yoga. The process first pushes off the dirt, the poison, then reveals the lower knowledge, the gems, all these things. We'll see all the gems in the limbs, ahiṃsā. Because of ahiṃsā, ahiṃsā pratishtayam tatsannitau vairatyāgaha. Beings lose their violence in the presence of one established in ahiṃsā. And finally, it results in supreme realization of the self. That is what the nectar represents. Okay, so that is the story. So with this, the first portion has ended, and now we are entering the second portion proper, Aṣṭāvangani. So the 8 angas, the 8 parts or the 8 limbs of yoga. This is the middle path. The mild path we saw is the Kriya Yoga, which is actually a subset of this Aṣṭāṅga Yoga. And then the extreme or the intense path is the Raja Yoga we saw in the first chapter. We'll see why Patanjali doesn't exactly say Aṣṭāṅga Yoga is the middle path, Kriya Yoga is the lower path, because it's a sutra format. We have to infer. Then the famous sutra, Yama niyama āsana prāṇāyāma Pratyāhāra dhāraṇā dhyāna samādhayor aṣṭāvangani. So the 8 limbs of yoga are Yama, niyama. Let me go here. Yama is abstinence or restraint. Yama means to rein, to bridle. Niyama means to observe. So niyama is observances. Asana is posture, so that it makes your restless body be able to sit for meditation for some time. So your body has to be controlled. That is asana. It's only a small portion of yoga. But now people think yoga means asana practice, which is not true. Prāṇāyāma. So prana plus ayama. Ayama means, what does a means? Last time I told you, right? Avivekakyate. Yeah, Anjana.
Sorry, is it like stretching or no? Or is it the opposite?
No, but what does a mean? So a means negation. A means what? I told you last class, remember? Avivekakyate.
No, I'm sorry.
Lena?
Great. Right.
Yes, exactly. So a means great. A means negation. So ayama means great control. Or it's literally means you have such control, you just extend the prana. So it is not prana yama. It is prana plus ayama. So it is means great. You're not like just restraining the prana. You're kind of, you have such great control. You're just extending the prana through breathing exercises. As you go through the sequence of the 8 limbs or parts, it starts with external practices and goes more and more internal. Because without the proper platform of these things, the deeper states of mind cannot be reached. Okay. So these are called external practices. Bahiraṅga-sādhana. Bahi means external. Bahiraṅga-sādhana means external. Sadhana is practice. Anga becomes Bahiraṅga, which are Anga means parts. These are the external parts of the practice. Okay, then comes the transition from the external to internals. That is Bahiraṅga to Antaraṅga. Antaraṅga means internal. Anta plus Anga becomes Antaraṅga. So Pratyāhāra is Prati means reverse. Prati ahara. Pratiprasava. Remember, you guys asked this word. Pratiprasava means reversing away from potency or pregnancy. Prasavam is potency or pregnancy. Reversing. Pratiprasava kaivalyam swarupa pratishtava chitishakti riti. Purushartha, last sutra of the Yoga Sūtras. Remember, I told you. Purushartha chunyanam gunanam pratiprasava kaivalyam swarupa pratishtava chitishakti riti. Then the mind itself reverses its potency, and the gunas reverse their potency. They just dissolve into prakriti. So prati is reversing. Pratyāhāra means reversing from eating, which is weaning of food, for not food, just what we eat, food for the senses by turning inward. If you're constantly seeing, smelling, enjoying, then that is, you're externally focused. Now to focus inward, you have to bring in your control. There is self-control. So not just if you see good food, not be tempted to eat that. I see that in, so typically for asana practice, your entire system has to be clean, which means if you want to feel the bandhas and you feel the prana, literally, at least in the Aṣṭāṅga Yoga tradition, it is all about prana and the manipulation on the channeling of the prana, all the bandhas, everything. So the first thing you need is a clean system with a clean colon, your intestines, nothing in the stomach. That is what will help you feel the prana. There's one guy in this Aṣṭāṅga circles, people sometimes after class, they have this chai, social and all that, and they get some food and keep it there. There's one guy who I've met, he claims to be a great yogi. He's a British guy. And somehow every time he'll be walking to the bathroom, every time he goes, he'll take a sweet and he'll eat it before practice. So that is not Pratyāhāra. Pratyāhāra means be able to control the senses so you're not attracted outside. In the Bhagavad Gītā, there's a very famous sloka. So the Pratyāhāra, the example for that is the Kurma avatara. So Kurma, a tortoise, is able to withdraw the limbs. So for example, the same in this churning of the ocean, the mountain will sink if not held by something. So Bhagavan Vishnu comes as a tortoise, Kurma avatara, and supports the mountain. So this is the in the asana practice is symbolized by Kurmasana, like a tortoise, and Supta Kurmasana with the limbs drawn inside. So the transition happens in this way. Okay. So Pratyāhāra is weaning of food. So in the Bhagavad Gītā, there's a sloka, Yata samharate chayam kurpongani vasarpashaha indriyani indriyatebhyaha tasya prajñā pratishtita. One, Bhagavan talks about one whose wisdom is well established. Like a tortoise withdrawing its limbs, this person withdraws their senses from the sense objects everywhere. That person's wisdom is well established. Okay. Now comes the Antaraṅga-sādhana, which means internal practices. This we've seen, dhāraṇā, dhyāna, and samādhi. Dhāraṇā is focus without interruptions. Dhyāna is continuous, uninterrupted focus on an object. Samādhi is a state of absorption where the object of focus and the subject, which is the meditator, become one. And I'm not going to go into this. You have to look at the examples we've seen, like a horse struggles to escape, but it's confined to a circle. It tries to move here, there, but it's within this. You bring it back, dhyāna. Then the horse settles down and the observer moves close to the horse. Then finally, in the samādhi, this is dhyāna. In samādhi, the horse and the observer become one entity. So it is just merging, complete absorption. We saw that. Okay. Now, I told you this, so I'll have a small quiz. Lena, did you have a question? No?
Did you mean focus without interruptions? Or
Focus without interruption for
your,
dhyāna.
on your slide, it says with.
Oh, sorry. I'm okay. No. With interruptions is correct. So, dhyāna means the mind can wander, you bring back. Mind can wander, you bring back. There is, remember in the first chapter, I showed the example of dhyāna, discontinuous flow, water. Series of contacts, not a smooth flow. Whereas dhyāna becomes like oil flowing. It's likened to a smooth flow of oil. Understood? Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Now, Okay, quiz question for you. I told this last time. Let's see how many remember. These 8 progressive stages. So the highest of this is the Antaraṅga-sādhana, dhāraṇā, dhyāna, and samādhi are the higher stages, and you transition from the external to the internal. I also said these 8 limbs, they're the middle path. But how do we know it is the middle path? Patanjali doesn't describe this explicitly. How do we know it's the middle path? I told this last time. The Kriya Yoga is a subset of this Aṣṭāṅga Yoga, so we know that it's the lowest path. Aṣṭāṅga Yoga is greater than this. But how do we know this Raja Yoga is the highest path? What we saw in the first chapter. Amy?
Well, that's the one that goes into all the stages of samadhi, right?
Yes.
So I don't know, it feels like a bridge, like we're getting to samadhi, but there's so much more past that, right?
Yes, exactly. So, in fact, very good. Yes, there's so much. Samadhi is just, this represents just the beginning of samadhi, the samprajñāta samadhi states. What he refers to as samadhi here is the samprajñāta samadhi. I mentioned this last time. Tatapi bahirangam nirpijasya, even these 3 states, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, are as though it's external compared to this nirbija samadhi. Remember, nirbija samadhi is the last shloka in the first chapter. So even when these latent impressions are, suppressed, it becomes nirbija samadhi. Tasyapi nirode sarva nirodan nirbija samadhi. That's how the first chapter ends. The highest state, seedless samadhi, where you don't need any seed at all. So these 3, that is dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, look like it's like external. It looks like it's a lower practice compared to this nirbija samadhi. So we know what we saw in the first chapter, that is the highest Raja Yoga, royal path, and Aṣṭāṅga Yoga is the middle path. Okay. All right. Now we'll go to yamas and niyamas, the stable platform required for to establish the practice on. Yama, as I said, is abstinence. Niyama is observance. These provide a stable platform for other limbs. Patanjali gives a lot of importance to these. Okay. Yamas. First yama. So yamas, there are 5 yamas. Yamas are ahiṃsā, satya, asteya, brahmacarya, aparigraha, yama. So ahiṃsā. So I have to say brahmacarya. So ahiṃsā, asteya, ahiṃsā, satya, ahiṃsā, satya, then asteya. So satya plus asteya becomes satyasteya when you are pronouncing. Ahiṃsā, satyasteya, brahmacarya, aparigraha, yama. It is not parigraha, it's aparigraha. So brahmacarya, I have to put a here, I forgot. Brahmacarya, aparigraha, yama. The yamas are, so if you see a lot of them or don'ts, we'll see that. Ahiṃsā means ahimsa, non-violence. Himsa is violence. Ahimsa means non-violence. First rule of yoga is non-violence. Then satya, truthfulness. Asteya, non-stealing. Brahmacharya, sexual restraint, because sexual energy is considered very potent. Brahmacharya, sexual restraint. Aparigraha, non-greed. Okay. Ahimsa, non-violence, not causing pain to any living being at any time in any manner. Vyasa declares the root of all other yamas is ahimsa. Ahimsa, truthfulness, satya, others are practiced only to support and perfect ahimsa. Vyasa places such an importance on ahimsa. If your truth hurts someone, it is not truth. If you cause suffering to other beings, it is your practice itself won't be good. It is, if you truth hurt somebody, Vyasa says, it is actually a sin disguised as virtue. It may look like these yamas and niyamas are cliches, but Vyasa says without this, you have no yoga practice. Okay. Importance of yamas. So it's a very powerful sutra. Jati desha kala samayana vachinna sarvabhauma mahavratam. So Patanjali calls this mahavratam. Vratam means a vow. A vow, you take a vow, and they call it's not an ordinary vow, it's a mahavratam, great vow. These yamas, because they had to be practiced, you have to take, it's like a vow you take. These are to be practiced universally without being limited by jati. We'll see all these. Desha, kala, samaya, anavachinna means not be limited by any of these things. Patanjali is using uncharacteristically emphatic language to stress the importance. Mahavratam. So Yoga Sutras, like I said, it's like a scientific document, like you do a journal. There you don't use sensationalism. You just stress, but he uses like uncharacteristically emphatic language. Okay, we'll see. So jati literally means means to give birth. Jati literally means birth, where you are born. Speech can be animal species, but here we are talking about human beings. So it refers to class in the society. People are born into that race, this race, or they're born into a higher class family. Some people are born into a poor class family, or in those days in India, they also had the varna system, the caste systems. Or in that, essentially the caste system is more based on occupation. So class or occupation, jati. Then desha means place where you are born. It's where you are, or not where you're born, where you are. Then time, kala, which depending, some people say, okay, I will observe all this during these days, but other days I will do whatever I want. So he says, no, it has to be observed constantly without being exempt, unconditioned, non-exempt, without being conditioned by class, place, time, or circumstances. Okay, and are applicable in all places of the earth. Sarvabhauma, and these are therefore considered great vows because they are non-exempt. So when you say yamas, it is restraints that are non-exempt by class in society, where you are born, irrespective of what your birth is, place where you are, the time of the day, or the circumstances. This has to be observed. So they are because of the practice of yamas, you get supreme siddhis. Patanjali is going to talk about a lot of this. So the story, the classic story given is that of King Shibi. Some of you may have heard about this story, but I will go through the story of King Shibi. We have to cover other things too, but I'll quickly go through the story of King Shibi. King Shibi was the son of King Ushinara. He was a legendary monarch in ancient India, widely revered as the absolute. King Shibi was revered as the absolute embodiment of compassion, charity, and dharma. He upheld righteousness under all conditions. He was famous for his vow. He has taken a vow of Saranagata Rakshana, the protection of anybody who seeks refuge. It was known throughout the three worlds that if a being, human, animal, or any being, even a ghost, came to King Shibi for protection, king would defend them even at the cost of his own life, kingdom, or wealth. He had completely transcended attachment to his physical body, anchoring his awareness purely in the eternal Atma. So he was such a great king. And The story is prominently featured in Mahabharata. It is located in the Vanaparva, the book of the forest. And during the Pandavas' grueling 12-year exile in the forest, Yudhishthira often felt despondent about the loss of the kingdom and the difficulty of upholding his dharma in these times of extreme hardship. To comfort and instruct him, sage Markandeya. So remember Markandeya, the one who was always 16. We saw him in the first chapter also. In the creation portion, Markandeya is seen here, and he just sees Bhagavan Vishnu, and he goes into the stomach, and he sees the entire universe during Pralaya. And he is the one at 16, he is saved from death by Shiva, and so Markandeya is that rishi. So Markandeya uses the story to show Yudhishthira that even the greatest kings are not measured by the lands they conquer, but their capacity for self-sacrifice and their unwavering adherence to truth. So he is telling Yudhishthira, you have unwavering adherence to truth, and the suffering and all that, don't compare, don't say your luster has not diminished in any way because you're suffering. You are still the greatest king, he's saying. This story also comes in the Buddhist literature as Sivijataka. The Buddha recounts a past life as a highly compassionate king. So it comes also in the Buddhist literature. What I'm trying to tell you is this is such a powerful story. And why there's a test. A test was born out of a debate in the celestial realms. The gods were gathered in heaven, and Indra, the king of the Devas, began praising King Shibi, declaring him the most righteous, truthful, and charitable monarch on the earth. Agni, the god of fire, however, was skeptical. Agni argued that it's easy for a wealthy, powerful king to practice charity because he has so much money and protect others when it cost him nothing but excess wealth. He's just giving so much wealth, he's giving away. Agni doubted that Shibi's commitment to dharma would hold up if it required agonizing physical pain and the sacrifice of his own life. To settle the debate and prove the depth of the king's character, Indra and Agni devised a severe moral dilemma. Agni took the form of a terrified dove. Indra took the form of a fierce, articulate hawk. They orchestrated the scenario to trap the king between two extreme conflicting duties: the duty to protect a refugee, the dove, and the duty to not cause starvation of another being, the hawk, because the dove is the hawk's prey. The test was specifically designed to see if King Shibi would compromise his vows, and so we'll see the story. So one afternoon, when the king was sitting in his court, a small dove flew frantically into his lap, trembling and gasping for breath. The dove pleaded for protection, explaining that it was being hunted by a hawk. True to his word, King Shibi placed his hand over the bird and promised it absolute safety. Moments later, a fierce hawk swooped down into the court, demanding its rightful prey. The hawk presented a deeply philosophical argument. By denying the hawk its natural food, the king was starving it and its family. The hawk argued that if the king protected the dove, he was committing violence against ahiṃsā, violence against the hawk. So King Shibi found himself in a profound moral dilemma. He could not break his vow to the dove, nor could he cause the death of the hawk by starvation. To resolve this, Shibi offered the hawk anything else in his kingdom: grains, fruits, or meat of already dead animals. The hawk refused, stating it only ate fresh meat, and it wanted that dove. But it agreed to compromise. It would leave the dove alone if the king offered a portion of his own flesh exactly equal to the weight of the dove. So, without hesitation, Demonstrating total non-attachment to his physical body, King Shibi agreed, and he placed a large balance. The large balance was gotten into the court, and the dove was placed on one side. Shibi takes a knife and he cuts a piece of his own thigh and puts it there. Miraculously, the scale did not budge at all. The dove was much heavier. The king cuts a larger piece and puts it, and he was in agonizing pain, but he was bleeding and he was still unperturbed in mind. Still, the dove was heavier. This tiny dove seemed so heavy. Finally, he couldn't do anything else. He is just bleeding, and he places himself on the balance. At that moment, the moment he stepped onto the scale, the hawk and the dove vanished. In their place stood Indra and Agni, the lords of the Indra, lord of the heavens. Agni is the lord of fire. They had taken the forms of the birds to test the king's vows. They blessed King Shibi, restoring his body to perfection, and they declared that his understanding of the yamas was absolute. He had realized that the physical body is temporary, but the Atma in all the beings, whether king, hawk, or dove, is equal and worthy of the utmost reverence, and therefore all beings should be protected. Okay, so that is the story of King Shibi and the dove and the hawk. Okay, so then Patanjali talks about the niyamas, the observances. Shaucha santosha tapas svadhyā eshvara pranidhanani niyama. Niyamas are shaucha, cleanliness, both internal and external, not just external cleanliness. Cleanliness of the mind is important. That is why food is given a very high priority. So in the Upanishads, it says that the grossest part of the food that we consume is eliminated. Then the next level becomes the mamsa, that is the flesh or the muscles of the body. Then the finest aspect of the food becomes the mind. So that is why food, you have to eat sattvic food. So cleanliness means the food intake should also be clean. Santosha, contentment. Tapas, austerity. Swadhyaya, study of scriptures that reveal the knowledge of the self. Swa adhyaya means self-study. Literally, the word means self-study. It means study of the scriptures which reveal the knowledge of the self. Ishvara pranidhana, surrender or devotion to Ishvara. We've seen samādhi siddhi Ishvara pranidhanatva. The mind can be focused by surrender to Ishvara, this entity called Ishvara. In yoga, it's defined as a special Purusha. In Vedanta, which is more the finally refined form of all the yoga, Sankhya philosophy, Ishvara is nothing but the one consciousness shining on the entire universe. The mind, the universal mind, the subtle body of the entire universe. Whereas we have a tiny subtle body, the universe has a huge subtle body. So that is Ishvara. Okay. Now, if you see, do you know what these three are? Tapas, Svadhyaya, Ishvara, Pranidhanani. Can anybody say what these three are?
Kriya Yoga.
Kriya Yoga. These are the mridu practice, the mild practice. So this is a Kriya Yoga, is a subset of the niyamas. So tapas, Svadhyaya, Ishvara, Pranidhanani, Kriya Yoga. So austerity, study of scriptures, and surrender to Ishvara. If you're very busy, a family person, so many responsibilities, just observe these three. I have seen a lot of people when I was growing up. My aunt, she's like a epitome of this. She was working very hard. She had a full-time job. She would wake up at 3 a.m. every day, and she will do her prayers, puja, all that. Then she will cook for the entire family, then go to work, come at 6, again cook. So austerity, very always observing vratas, not eating during this time. She will cook delicious food, but she won't eat it. And she will study the scriptures and pray. So these three. Then Patanjali says a very important thing. Using counter thoughts when negative thoughts arise. Vitarka bhadane pratipaksha bhavanam. When disturbed by negative thoughts that contradict the yamas and niyamas, cultivate the opposite thoughts. Because the yamas and niyamas, it's not very sensational. You are fasting. Tapas is a form of tapas is fasting. But you would want to eat something. So that is why the stories in the Puranas, they are there for a reason, because it tells you, okay, if you do this and this, if you violate, then later you will suffer. So vitarka means negative deviant thoughts. So we saw also it's vitarka samadhi. It's meaning gross. So here it's used in the context of negative deviant thoughts. Vitarka bhadane, bhadanam means disturbed by. So even in colloquial South Indian languages, badam illa they'll say, which means it doesn't matter. So it doesn't disturb. Bhadanam means to be disturbed by. Then pratipaksha means, prati I already told you it's opposite, right? So pratipaksha means developing the opposite. Bhavanam means cultivation of the opposite thought. So Swami Hariharananda adds a very practical psychological dimension. The mind, he says, runs in grooves, and the thoughts travel on these well-formed grooves. The deeper the groove, the easier it is to travel. When a situation arises, somebody insults you, the mind slides into the old groove of anger. Pratipaksha bhavanam is deliberate act of digging a new groove. He wants that initially this feels artificial. You may feel angry, but you force yourself to think, okay, person, just a poor person, he is suffering. That's why he or she acted like that. He states this is repetition. That's why it's called bhavana, means cultivation. Bhavana means cultivation is key. If you keep summoning the opposite thought, eventually the old groove fills up, and the new groove, the patience or the truth, becomes the path of least resistance. Okay, the classic story is the story of Draupadi forgiving Ashwatthama. Okay, remember Sumitra, you asked a question, what if we have this anger towards this, somebody you love, all that, how do we work on this? So I said at that time, vitarka bhadane pratipaksha bhavanam, we'll come to that. So this is the story. This is the most poignant example of pratipaksha bhavanam, overcoming the impulse of violence with the counter thought of compassion. The story of Draupadi forgiving Ashwatthama in the Mahabharata. Sauptika Parva, or it's also there in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Vitarka, the impulse for revenge. At the end of the Kurukshetra war, Ashwatthama was very bitter because his father, Dronacharya, had been killed. He wanted to take revenge, but he was not strong enough to fight the Pandavas. So only 3 people escape, Kripa, Kritavarma, and Ashwatthama. So they are resting under a tree at night and sleeping. Ashwatthama is restless, and he was looking up. At that time, there was a family of crows in the tree. And it's already 7:49. Okay, I'll go through the story. There's a family of crows in the tree, and the owl was watching. It tried to hunt the crows during dusk, but it was not successful because the crows warded off the attack. Now the owl saw the crows sleeping, and it launches a surprise attack, kills the father and mother crow, and destroys all the babies. So the destruction of the babies gave Ashwatthama an idea. So he said, okay, I was not able to I can't kill the Pandavas. They're very strong, but somehow, and even their kids, they're strong. They have 5 kids. So Draupadi had 5 kids, one with each of the Pandavas. Now, when we're sleeping, I will go and kill them. So all these 3, they make a plan. So Kripacharya, he's a Brahmana. He shouldn't be doing all this, but he also takes part. So Ashwatthama goes into the camp, kills all the 5 sons of Draupadi, and there are other people sleeping too, and they try to escape, but Kripa and others who were at the entrance, they kill the rest. So this is how he got his revenge. But the Pandavas were very angry, and Arjuna goes and captures Ashwatthama. You see Ashwatthama leaning on the ground. So Bhima was roaring, kill him, he's a child murderer. Krishna now tests Draupadi. So Krishna pokes Draupadi and says, Draupadi, of course, she is the one who's the most heartbroken because all her 5 kids are killed. So they leave it to Draupadi as to what kind of punishment he should get. Krishna even tells her, Draupadi, he does deserve death. So you decide what kind of death he deserves. Then Draupadi at that moment, but who's she standing next to? She's standing next to Bhagavan. So her mind was pure at that moment. Everything justified violence, but Draupadi looked at the bound, humiliated. He was a Brahmana standing before her. Instead of seeing the murderer of her sons, she forced her mind to see the opposite. She thought about the Guru Bhakti. He is the son of Dronacharya, the teacher who gave her 5 husbands, the skill. Empathy. Somewhere his mother Kripi, so Kripacharya and Kripi, they're brother and sisters. Kripi is married to Dronacharya. So Kripi's son, somewhere his mother Kripi is waiting for him. I know the pain of a mother crying for her son. If we kill him, Kripi will burn in the same fire of grief that I am burning in now. Why should I duplicate the suffering? So she spoke to the Pandavas, release him. Let not his mother, the wife of our Guru, weep as I am weeping. So Kripi is already heartbroken because of Dronacharya's death. Draupadi successfully applied Pratipaksha Bhavanam. She countered the impulse of Himsa with a thought of Karuna, compassion. So even though Ashwatthama was eventually punished, his gem, he had a gem on his head removed, and he's the only person that Krishna curses. So Krishna curses him to wander for several thousand years. So some people say, depending on when the Kurukshetra war ended, because this happens right after the Kurukshetra war, some people say Ashwatthama is still walking amongst us. So Krishna's curse was, may you walk for a few thousand years seeing all. That is the worst thing to happen, to see destruction around you all the time for thousands of years. That way, death is a great savior. You don't have to see all that stuff that happens in the world. But Krishna curses him. May you wander for a long time, see all the decadence in the earth, in the Kali Yuga. And so that's why some people say he's still walking amongst us. So this is how Draupadi applied Pratipaksha Bhavana. Okay. So then using counter thoughts, how Patanjali gives an example. Vitarka himsadaya kritakarita numodita lobha krodha moha purpaka mrudumatyadi matra dukkha jnananta palatiti pratipaksha bhavanam. Dukkha jnana ananta pala. So this the Pratipaksha Bhavanam is reflecting on this cultivation of the opposite. What kind of opposite? When negative thoughts like lobha, krodha, greed, anger, moha, which is delusion, all these when greed, anger, or delusion, whether it is mridu, madhya, adimatra, which being mild, medium, or intense, whether kritakarita, anumodita, whether done, caused, or approved, negative thoughts like violence, whether done, caused, or approved, arising from greed, anger, or delusion, and being mild, medium, or intense, they result in dukkha, ajnana, ananta pala. Ananta means endless. Dukkha, ajnana is they end in pain and ignorance. What kind of pain? Endless pain and ignorance. Iti pratipaksha bhavanam. When you think so, reflecting on this in this manner, you cultivate the opposite thoughts. That is why the Shastras are full of these example stories. So, krita is direct. Krita means doing the act yourself. If I do the act myself, some people say, okay, I'm not going to slaughter animals. I'm going to just eat the slaughtered animals. That is karita, indirect, hiring or manipulating someone else to do. Or you can say, I can have a hired person to kill somebody. I'm not killing, but still it's the same sin. And we'll see a story if you have time. Anumodita is approval, silently approving or taking pleasure when someone else does an act. So the classic example is Dhritarashtra. Okay, so the three causes are greed, anger, delusion, lobha, krodha, moha, and the three intensities can be mild, even a mild small lie or a pinch, or a medium like a theft or a slap, or adimatra, murder or war. All these acts of violence are improper. Okay, so one has to use pratipaksha bhavanam, reflecting on all this and cultivating the opposite. Bhavana is cultivation. Pratipaksha is opposite, cultivation of the opposite thought. So the classic example is Dhritarashtra. I don't know if I have time, so I have one more sutra to cover. So let's see if we have time. We'll come to the Dhritarashtra story. So the yamas in detail, and we'll see the resultant siddhis now. Patanjali talked about yamas and niyamas. So ahiṃsā, satya, asteya, brahmacarya, aparigraha. Ahiṃsā, we saw, is the non-violence. Satya is truthfulness. Asteya is non-stealing. Brahmacharya is sexual restraint. Aparigraha is non-greed. Okay, these are the yamas. So we saw that in the previous. So ahiṃsā, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, and aparigraha. These are the yamas. Okay, now the first yama, we will see the first yama. So before that, ahiṃsā is non-violence, and it's the most important and foundational guideline of yoga. Generally, non-injury to oneself, not pushing oneself too hard. Tapas should also not violate ahiṃsā. Austerity should not violate ahiṃsā. Then non-injury to other beings. That's why following a vegetarian diet, eco-friendly diet, thinking non-violent thoughts, since these agitate the mind and create a stir. Okay. Sutra. Ahiṃsā pratishtayam tatsannidau vairatyaga. In the presence of one in whom ahiṃsā is established, all hostility is renounced in other beings. So this is told as a siddhi. So, the siddhi is the internal state of the yogi creates a peace zone where the survival-based hostility of the animalistic nature in us is temporarily suspended. The animalistic nature, many of the time we commit violence because of survival, fear of survival. So when one is established in ahiṃsā, that yogi creates a peace zone. Energy is that of peace, so beings become calm. The classic example is the story of Angulimala. So, Angulimala and the Buddha. How? So let me just tell the story and then I'll stop. Angulimala was a terrifying brigand. How did he become a thief? Angulimala was born as ahiṃsā, meaning the harmless one. Very brilliant student. He was a brilliant student, but his classmates were all jealous of him. Very kind, sweet person. His jealous classmates tricked their teacher into believing ahiṃsā insulted him, because ahiṃsā was so brilliant that their students told their teacher, the teacher was good, but sometimes the teacher would make mistakes. So the students said, ahiṃsā is kind of scoffing at you. So he's insulting you. In a fit of twisted rage, the teacher was also a powerful person, the knowledgeable scholar, and the teacher gave ahiṃsā a curse. I don't know why he gave this curse. You will collect 1,000 human fingers. So when he gave the curse, ahiṃsā became mad by this curse, and he went to the Jalini forest. He became a ruthless brigand, killing travelers, cutting off a finger from each victim and wearing it as a necklace. Angula means finger. Angulimala means one who wears the fingers as a necklace. So you can see him wearing these fingers as a necklace in this thing. So Anguli is finger, mala is a garland. So when Angulimala had finally collected 999 fingers that he wore around his neck, he needed only one more. One day, so this was an encounter with Buddha. He saw a lone monk walking down the forest. So the monk had come to the village, and in that village, they told him, please don't go on that path. Take the roundabout path around the village and then don't go through this forest. But the Buddha said, no, I will go through the forest. They said there is this dangerous Angulimala there. So Buddha had entered the forest, and actually the Buddha knew. The Buddha wanted to save him. That's why he entered. And Angulimala didn't know that he was the Buddha and that he had entered the forest to actually save him. Angulimala saw the Buddha. He unsheathed his sword and began to run towards the Buddha. He was running fast. Buddha was walking very slowly. And as the Buddha was walking very slowly, the Angulimala was running fast, but the distance seems to keep growing between the two of them. Surprisingly, Angulimala was running even faster and the distance was getting even more. Frustrated and exhausted, Angulimala shouted, "Monk, stop, stop." Then the Buddha stopped and turned around and he said, "Oh, Angulimala, I have stopped. You are the one who has not stopped." So what's the Buddha trying to say? Angulimala was confused. I asked, how come a slowly walking monk could claim to have stopped while a running man had not? Buddha explained, I have stopped forever. I have stopped doing violence to all living beings. You have no restraint regarding living beings. Therefore, I have stopped, but you have not stopped. The words struck Angulimala like a lightning bolt. The logic of his own cruelty collapsed. At that time, the curse was lifted. He realized the depth of his depravity, threw down his weapons, and prostrated before the Buddha, asking to be ordained as a monk. The Buddha accepted him, and the terrifying brigand became the venerable monk, Venerable Angulimala. However, his path was not easy. When he went into the city to beg for alms, people recognized him. They pelted him with stones, sticks, and leaving him often bloodied and broken. When he returned to the monastery bleeding, the Buddha told him, "Oh Brahmin, bear this. You are experiencing the results of deeds that would have otherwise caused you to burn in hell for thousands of years. Because of you stepping onto the path of Dharma, it gotten everything was lessened. Angulimala bore the pain with total equanimity. Eventually, he attained nirvana, enlightenment, proving that no matter how deep one's past sins are, a radical shift towards compassion could lead to liberation. Okay, so that is the story of Angulimala. So I have now told one story, the Dhritarashtra's sin of approval, to illustrate the Anumodita. I will do that in the next class. Okay.